we rely on our motivation to make these changes and thinking that we're going to be motivated all the time. And motivation is such an unreliable thing that it's one of the worst things to rely on something for consistency.
Welcome back to You Need a Counselor. My name is Julie Johnson. I am the president and founder of Erins Solutions. We are a strength-based counseling agency here in Iowa doing in-office therapy, in-school therapy, and in-home behavioral health intervention services. We do have 9 locations across Iowa. We're also doing telehealth right now on the computer and over the phone. So if you are in Iowa, in the United States, which now we need to quantify, give us a call. Let us know if we can get you set up with a counselor.
And I'm Krissa. I am the vice president at Erins Solutions in charge of the behavioral health department, where we go in-home or in school and work with kids ages 4 to 18 on different behavioral skills. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So the mission of our podcast is that we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Yeah, so we post on Sunday nights. So if you are lonely and looking for something to do on a Sunday night, batch up your laundry throughout the week. We don't do laundry during the week. We put that stuff away on Sunday nights, and that is it. I am not spending a Tuesday night putting laundry away or balling up socks. So we post on Sunday nights at 5 o'clock. Go ahead and listen to us then. Put away your laundry while you listen to it. That gives you the entire week to either schedule with your counselor if you haven't seen your counselor in a little bit, or to call and get set up with a counselor this week. We post on Sunday nights. You'll also see a preview on Friday afternoons of the upcoming Sunday episode on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So check that out. So today we have our furthest away guest we've ever had, other side of the globe. So until recently, our furthest away guest was in Malaysia. However, Erin Todd, our guest today, is here to top that with Australia. So we've got Erin Todd here. I'm going to brag on her a little bit. So Erin is a clinical psychologist, had been in the field doing public health for children, working with mental health diagnoses, inpatient and outpatient community mental health for 14 years, and then recently has started her own practice with a focus on holistic healing. So focusing on not only our mental health, but also our physical health too, and the ways that those all interact with each other. So we are extremely excited to hear about that. So welcome to the podcast, Erin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. What a great intro. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. We're very excited to have you here. And you are from New Zealand, but you are currently in Australia, right? And so your practice is based in Australia, but it sounds like you also do some health coaching, which potentially could be available to people outside of Australia, kind of around the globe.
You'll have to put up with my New Zealand accent as well.
I love it. Okay, I gotta say that I love it. I don't know if this is offensive or not. I feel like it might be, but I'm gonna say it. It reminds me of the Rescuers Down Under, and it makes me feel so nostalgic.
Okay. But yes, I have insurance, so I guess the issues with insurance is I can't see people from the US or Canada, but otherwise worldwide, I can do sort of online therapy and coaching as well.
Very cool. So what was it that really, so you were working in the mental health field, you were working with children in kind of a variety of different ways, but in the community, working with kids. And then what was it that drew you to start to go towards working with people on their physical health and wellness as well?
Yeah, I think that's a key thing that probably in the Western world and the way we're set up, we have this real separation between the mind and the body. And we even the way often, and I'm not sure exactly how it is in America, but I imagine it would be similar in terms of, we have people to go to. You need to go there to manage your mental health. You need to go there to the GP to get your health, and then they send to specialists. And I just don't think that's really how we work best. Our body is a system, and what we do physically impacts how we feel mentally as well, and also vice versa. So there is so much evidence now that talks about things like physical exercise. And yes, that's fantastic for physical health. Much of the evidence is saying it's as good as, if not better, for mental health as well. Mm-hmm. And I guess our mindsets and how we think are also being shown to improve our physical health. And there is links between our thinking and our gratitude and gratitude practices that also seem to impact our immune system. So I feel like the arbitrary silos that we've set up, well, that's what they are, they're arbitrary. So they sort of don't really get to how we're going to improve both our emotional and our physical health. So I think I guess part of what I really hope to do is get it out there that it's not just you go to a counsellor if you're sad or depressed or anxious. Like, you also have to work on your physical health as well as sort of your mental health to generally get better and feel better. So part of the reason I feel like I have worked particularly in children's hospitals for the last sort of decade, and it's been amazing doing that, but it is very medical. It is a very medical model, and I just felt there was a bit more out there for me. And I guess going on my own journey of improving and optimizing my health has sort of all tried to bring it together. And I think I want to be able to start to spread that word as well, both in individual sessions and I guess out there generally.
I love that. There is such, and so here in the United States as well, I think what you're saying is fairly universal in our Western culture, is that there's this separation between our physical health. We go to the doctor, right? And we go to the hospital, and with our mental health, and then we go to a counselor, and there isn't as much combination as we would like. And you're kind of going, okay, I am a mental health provider, but I'm also concerned with your physical well-being. And I also think that is important. So I love that you're kind of breaking down the barrier between the two and saying, no, these are connected. These are not separate issues.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the more that we can sort of start to understand that and get that out there, I think the better for everyone. Like, we are, again, that Western world, we're not the healthiest that we've ever been. So that message to improve your physical health as well, and how we do that and what we do on a day-to-day basis always works towards that. And I think sometimes it's just the awareness of that. And then we can start to shift our behaviors. Like, I know if I eat this food, I don't feel as good. But sometimes we don't even have that awareness. We're just in that same routine that we're operating along. The more we break down those barriers, I think the better with that kind of stuff.
And so you mentioned kind of going on your own physical health journey. Can you tell us more about that?
I don't have this dramatic story really of I had this illness or anything like that. I guess for a long period in my life, I just probably had a bit of low energy. And I think the trigger for me is my father passed away when I was very young. So I'm now older than he was. And I think there was sort of a trigger around that in terms of, well, life is short. How do I improve my life so that I'm functioning at my optimum? And I think that's the other thing that often happens when we look at sort of the health in the medical field, is that we look at measures on blood work and everything that basically this is the normal, but the normal isn't necessarily optimal. So I guess I've just sort of explored things. I've gone to particular doctors that are more holistically minded, worked with things around my physical health, what I'm eating, understand what things don't really agree with me and what do. Should have shifted my diet, and I guess just to become more healthy. And in a way, it has really helped. Like, I do have more energy. I guess in that way, I also have more energy and space for my clients as well. I can be much more present for them as well as myself. So it's not, I guess it's not a really dramatic thing that often you hear, I had an illness and I overcome it. But I guess it's just that, again, it's part of that mindset and sort of being able to search and look for what's going to help me optimize my life really as I'm getting older.
Absolutely. So what are some of the things that you recommend in terms of if somebody comes to you with a wellness goal? So do a lot of clients come to you after being diagnosed with an illness and then say, hey, I want to work on my wellness there?
It is different. Like, I mean, the way the system is set up, we get referrals from GPs that is very focused on the client has depression or anxiety. So I'm still getting the mental health referrals. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I try and open the door is like to obviously work collaborative with a client and set goals around that. But what I also try and open the door and within that sort of, whether it be depression or anxiety or chronic illness or pain, just try and open the doors to there's more than just let's look at your thoughts, and the thoughts isn't necessarily something that is causing this, and how do we open that, and educating about research about physical health and wellness and what physical exercise does, and then trying to sort of look at the barriers to why they're not doing this. And so I'm probably not getting the referrals that are specific at the moment around health and wellness, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to open that up with the referrals and the ones that I am getting.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I love what you're doing, and personally, I love it because, so my story over the last year or so, well, year and a half, 2 years. So about a year and a half ago, Krista and I were at a meeting and I left in a really big hurry and everybody was like, what's going on or whatever. And so I left right away at the end of the meeting and I was having chest pains. Like I was having like shooting chest pains and I drove straight to the ER. Like I drove myself to the ER, which now when I think about it, I'm like, why didn't I have Krista drive? Yeah, I know. As soon as I told Krista, like I'm in the ER, because I was like, I would have driven you there. What are you doing? But I was so panicked about it. I just went. And I was having these chest pains. And so they ended up doing a whole bunch of blood work. They did an MRI on me and they diagnosed me with fatty liver disease and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which I didn't even know was a thing. And they explained it to me. And then they said, and this is where I think the medical model leaves a lot of people kind of high and dry, is that, we've got great providers who are doing the best that they can, but I think it's just the system that is not integrating all of these other things that are happening with our health. And so they gave me the diagnosis and they said, this will be really much improved if you lose about 40 pounds. And I said, cool. Wish I had thought of that one. That would be great. Let's do that. What's the prescription for that, right? And so, this was one of those things where they said, it's not a actively treated diagnosis. It's not something where if you've got kidney failure, you come in for dialysis, right? If you've got diabetes, you come in for blood sugar testing. And with fatty liver disease, they said, well, and I Googled it, which I don't recommend either, but I did Google it and it said fatty liver disease, for one of the first symptoms is that you're fatigued, which I have a 4-year-old like who is not fatigued, right? Yeah. And then one of the second symptoms is you die. And I said, what? Like, how do I not die of this at the age of 34? And so I said, I got to do something about this. And they said, well, really the only thing for you to do is lose weight. And as a person who has tried to lose weight my entire life, I go, well, yeah, if I could do that, I would have just done it. Right. And so that happened. And I also 2 years ago got diagnosed with sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, which they also said, well, if you get a calorie counter and track your calories in and out, you can totally just lose 40 pounds and this will go away. And I said, oh, cool. Sounds awesome. Let's do that. Sign me up for that. And so I feel like personally, I've experienced these kinds of things where you get the diagnosis, you go, okay, this is a wake up call. This is a scary thing. I don't expect to have these, my body failing me at this age. And then it's like, well, lose this weight or do, make these health changes that most of us have been thinking about trying to do or actively trying to do for years and years and years and years. And then that's the end of treatment. That's the end of the medical treatment that you get. And so I love the idea that there are people out there like you who, when somebody does have something like this, I could go to somebody like you and say, okay, I've been trying this forever. I have all the motivation in the world, right, to cure these diagnoses. But I need support. I need that. I need the mental health part of this, the behavioral, the habit forming pieces of this, in order to overcome these things. And last month was the 2-year anniversary, and I no longer need a CPAP for obstructive sleep apnea, and I don't have fatty liver disease anymore, right? And so those are exciting things, and they are doable, but I think that there isn't as much support as would be very, very helpful in those situations. So that's a really, really long way of saying, I think what you are doing is so needed for so many people because there's that gap. And I think that people don't always think about mental health care in terms of their physical health goals.
Yeah.
And it is interesting that you say that about sleep too, because there is a lot of research about the importance of sleep and the time you're sleeping. And also, if you're not sleeping properly, then you sometimes can't lose weight or you put on weight. So sometimes you can actually change your sleep patterns without changing anything else, and that can help you shift a bit of weight as well. So it's all really, really connected. And sometimes you don't necessarily have to start with the weight. It could be about the sleep. And again, life gets in the way. Having a 4-year-old doesn't always sort of mean that you're going to get really good sleep. But there's definitely stuff that you can start to shift around different things like your sleep or your exercise or movement and things like that to help sort of that physical and mental wellness, I guess.
I feel like in terms of, habit forming, even around sleep hygiene. So in terms of, I wake up really, really early in the morning, which means I have to be asleep by 9 o'clock or else I can't wake up early in the morning. And the only reason I wake up early in the morning is so I can get all my stuff done before my kid wakes up, right? So that's like my only time to do that. But if I'm not asleep by 9, there's no way 5 a.m. is happening, right? So I say, okay, I've got to be asleep by that time. But even something like that, there are so many difficulties that come into forming a new habit like that. Difficulties with even like setting boundaries or having self-efficacy to know that if I set a goal for myself that I can achieve that goal, right? Or breaking that down into smaller doable tasks like, okay, I'm going to turn half the lights off at 8 o'clock, right? Or I'm going to I'm not going to think about, okay, I'm going to have to go to sleep at 9, because when you do that, like, it seems very overwhelming because like, I'm just going to lay there for 3 hours before I fall asleep. Like, what's the point of that? But then building those little things around it, like, okay, I'm going to try listening to a meditation, or I'm going to try listening to Netflix while I'm laying there, right? Or I'm going to play a game in my mind of like, I'm just not going to move my body until I fall asleep, like until the next morning. And it's all these things that come into a habit like that. But I think that there's a tendency to think, well, it's sleep. Like, why do we need help or support to know how to sleep? It's sleep. It should be a norm. Like, we should just be born knowing how to do that. But I will tell you, as the mom of a 4-year-old, we are not born knowing how to do that. Nobody knows how to do that as a kid. And it is something to develop. But I think that things like what we eat and when we eat, how often we eat, and keeping our energy up with food, like even things like not skipping meals and having the discipline of like, I'm going to eat, even though I'm not starving right now, I'm still going to eat my snack, right? All of those things are I think they're more challenging because they seem simple.
Yes, yeah. And I think this is part of that mindset thing that we have. It's like, well, I should be doing it. It's so simple. And then what can happen is then we beat ourselves up about it. And then we're not very compassionate to ourselves. And then we sort of end up giving up. So I think there's lots of different strategies to start to form habits. I think you talked about some of them already, those small steps, setting things up. You might be setting reminders. I've talked to some clients about setting a reminder at a particular time at night, like an alarm to go to sleep rather than just an alarm to wake up.
Yeah.
So there's lots of little things like that you can do. But I think the other thing we often do is we rely on our motivation to make these changes, and thinking that we're going to be motivated all the time. And motivation is such an unreliable thing that it's one of the worst things to rely on something for consistency. So there's other things to sort of set that up. And I think the environment's a really important factor. So whether that's that alarm that you set, or whether you, if you want to get up at a certain time to do some jobs or do some exercise, it's like, well, wake up and then put your yoga mat next to your bed. So it's there, you're doing it, it's prompting. You know, are you wanting to have less time on social media? Well, don't have your phone right next to you, put it in another room. So it's all these things, similar with things like food. You know, if you don't have the food in the house, you're often less likely to eat sort of those types of foods that you don't want to. So I think there's other ways to rely on it. It's sort of relationships too, so that accountability. Maybe you've got a partner who's really supportive and they'll do some things with you together, or they'll prompt you, or you're doing something with a friend. But I think the other key thing that we don't sort of have for ourselves is that self-compassion. Like, no one is perfect. If we're trying something new, it's new. We're not going to get it perfect the right time. We're not going to get it perfect every time. We're never going to do it perfectly all the time. And how we talk to ourselves is a really important part of sort of being able to move through that, and reflect as well. You know, sometimes we try and put something in place and it doesn't work once, and so we go, oh, it just doesn't work. Whereas actually, if we had the time to go, well, it didn't work this time, but why didn't it work this time? And start to slow down a bit and reflect on things, then that can help the process. You know, we have busy lives these days. We don't often have that time to reflect and put the energy into things. But I think if we take that time to set it up and set those really small, easy, simple habits, then it can start to make some changes and a bit more consistent in our life as well.
I love that. I feel like with habits, especially healthy habits, I love what you're saying about motivation, because it is, I think that I know for me, like, I have it, I know that I will say, I'll be like, oh, I'm going to do that. Like, I'm going to do it. But I also know that the me that is tomorrow is not the me that's saying I'm going to do it. And so if I commit to, I'm going to do something, and whether I commit it to somebody else, or most of the time with our own personal health, it's harder, because we're making those commitments to ourselves, and we're the first person we break a promise to. Most of us, we won't break a promise to our partner. We won't break a promise to somebody else, but we'll break a promise to ourselves like that. Right. And so the idea of, well, I'm going to get up early and go for a walk outside, right? Immediately when we're tired, we're like, nope, don't want to do that. And it doesn't feel the same as breaking a promise to a friend who's now outside our door waiting for us, right, to go on this walk. And I think that, knowing that and being able to accept that, hey, there is that part of me that is not going to be motivated tomorrow, and that's okay. It's that you're talking about accepting that part of ourselves and going, yeah, that part of ourselves is normal, and that part of ourselves is fine. We just have to work around it. And so, for example, I just got so I don't have to use the CPAP anymore, but I have to use this like mouth guard thing that juts my jaw out while I sleep. And so it's much more portable than the CPAP. But when they gave it to me, they go through all the directions with it, right? Like, make sure you clean it this many times, make sure you get all of the little metal pieces when you clean it, and then drop it in water with these little tabs every Saturday. And I was going, oh my gosh, I don't know what, right? And so I had to sit down and write out, these are the systems I'm going to do to make sure I keep this thing clean and I actually use it, right? So where am I going to keep it? Well, I keep it next to the toilet in the upstairs, because that's the first place I go in the morning. And you have to, when you take it out, you have to put this little spacer thing in so it doesn't actually adjust your jaw. And that spacer thing was the thing I was like, I'm never going to remember this thing ever, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to work it into what I do in the morning. What is the first thing I do in the morning? I go to the bathroom and I'm not going to forget to do it. So that's where the spacer is right there next to the toilet. So I go, okay, I'm going to sit here, and it gives me permission to look at my phone for the first 15 minutes of my morning, because I have to set the timer, because I have to wear that thing for 15 minutes, right? And so it was like, ooh, okay, that's a little motivation. And so, like you said, things like environment, just setting up, thinking through, where am I going to put this? In the morning at 5 a.m., there is 0% chance that I'm going to go downstairs to the drawer and put that thing in my mouth. There's a 0% chance. There's a 0% chance I'm going to brush the thing at 5 a.m., right? Like, I don't even consider that that's an option that I'm going to remember to do, right? So I have to like put it right there in front of me, so that it's the path of least resistance. You know, I'm sitting there in the toilet. I want to look at Facebook for 15 minutes. So, okay, let me put this thing in. It's a perfect excuse to do it, right? So kind of being able to reflect on what are the processes of this. Also, being able to acknowledge that, like, there's a Julie in here that doesn't care about dental hygiene. Like, there is a Julie in this brain that doesn't care about wellness. Like, that's the 5 a.m. Julie. She doesn't care. And so I have to kind of work the process around her and leave her little treats, like I'm training a hamster. And I know that about myself. And so, but I think that because if we're judging ourselves, and so you were talking about, like, what are our messages to ourselves about ourselves, and so if I'm not willing to go to that place of planning it, and go to that place where I know that morning Julie is not smart and isn't motivated, doesn't care, if I'm not willing to accept that version of me, I can't plan for her. I just can't plan for her. So if I think she shouldn't exist, I can't make habits around her to make her successful. So I love what you're saying about accepting those pieces of ourselves and knowing, like, okay, that did not work. I need to put the alarm clock on the other side of the room, because 5 a.m. Julie does not care. She will hit that alarm until 7:30. She doesn't care.
Yeah, and we all have different parts of ourselves that, you know, maybe we don't like quite as much as others, but they're all part of us. It's who we are. And to be able to accept that, I think is really useful.
But if I hated her because she was lazy, right, then I can't plan for her. So yeah, I love that. So when you're working with clients, you're really working on their environment, setting up systems for themselves.
Yeah, that can be part of it. I mean, I also have some adults who have ADHD, and, you know, with that there is that organization, that goal-directed planning is just hard for them. It's just built into them that it's really hard. Yeah. So some of the keys are looking at their environments, and it's even more important for them to set up calendars and have scaffolding around how they do things on a day-to-day level. Because for them to rely on some of the thought processes and everything is just much harder for them based on their difficulties. So I think it's trying to have that balance, and also know, based on the client in front of you, you know, what are their needs, and how you can sort of support them to be where they want to be and achieve the goals that they want to achieve.
So do you find a lot of challenges with diet culture? Diet culture, I feel like, is one of the biggest barriers to health in the world. So what, maybe not in the world, but here in America, I would say diet culture really, really does a number on health. Do you find that in Australia, and with the clients that you're working with, do you find challenges with diet culture?
Yes. I mean, I think there is a sort of, sometimes it can be, people have very strong ideas about food. You know, food, I guess, is the way that we can care for each other. Like, I guess as a parent as well, you know, you have this child in front of you, and your job is to feed that child. So there can be a lot of emotional components that come with food. I guess from the way that I work, I sort of try and put some of those things aside. You know, often clients might work with a dietitian or a nutritionist to really look at the what they're eating. I guess my view is looking at some of the emotional components around eating as well. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I think generally people should eat healthy. Healthy in my book means sort of more whole foods, less processed foods, less sugar. So just those general sort of guidelines that I think everyone would probably agree with. And the thing that happens, I think, with food, you can do a lot in terms of timing of food. That, you know, they do have some evidence about if you're eating too late at night, it impacts your sleep and things like that. So sometimes timing of food can be altered a bit. But I think it's also that the thinking, like, what does food mean for you?
Yeah.
What is that hunger? There are different types of hunger that people have. They can have hunger because they're actually physically hungry. They could have like a hunger when you might smell something and suddenly you have a hunger for it, whereas before you didn't. But there's those emotional hunger, like trying to fill a hole. So, I mean, I don't work specifically with clients with eating disorders. I feel that that's a specialist area that I haven't really worked with. But when food does come up, I try not to jump on the everything else that's happening, because there is a lot out there. Trying to help the person in front of you start to notice those connections for themselves. Like, when are they eating, and what is it about their eating, and how do they feel after they're eating? So part of it is helping that person be a bit more conscious of their decisions. You know, I'm not really dictating a diet. That's not part of my scope of practice. But what I can do is help people be a bit more conscious about, if that's what they want to focus on, just help them be a bit more conscious about what's triggering their eating, what it's like for them, and how do they feel afterwards. So bringing a bit into that body awareness, that consciousness, and start to help them make connections of how it might be impacting their life. But I agree, there is a lot. There's probably a lot of money in a lot of diets and fads and all that stuff. But I guess I try and stay away from that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think the thing about the, commercial diets is that it's a business. Like Atkins is a business.
Yeah.
And so it isn't going to work for every person. And I think what you're talking about is for people to set up a system for themselves to be able to recognize and then make changes based on how they feel after they have certain foods or after they eat at a certain time of day, and being able to have mindfulness around that, and giving people permission to say, like, you are an individual person. So, yes, your aunt might have gone on Atkins and lost 100 pounds, but that doesn't mean that that's going to work for you. And if that doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean you failed that diet. I think there's so much, like with diet culture, it just feels like this hope failure like cycle and spinning that happens so often. And it can be so demotivating, and it can take away our self-efficacy, and our belief that we can do things, and not just diet things, but like that we can do any of our goals, if we have that, consistent hope failure kind of spiral. And what I like about what you're talking about is that it isn't this, okay, I'm putting my hope in a plan. It's, I'm creating a plan. And so I can put my hope in a small change that I might tweak, that I might make to my plan. But if that tweak doesn't work, that doesn't mean my plan doesn't work. That means that tweak might need more tweaking, or I might need to do something different for that, or try something new in that part of the plan. But you're really building a personalized plan with the person.
Yeah, and just helping that person be conscious of what's happening for them. I think that's really important. I think sometimes we have lost that a bit with sort of all these marketing probably messages that we're getting. And as you say, you've seen on Facebook or Instagram, this person did this and they lost so much, therefore I need to do this. But actually, as you say, like, we're all different, and we need to figure out us and what's driving us to do the things that we're doing, and what is helpful about that and what is not helpful, and how do we make that decision to shift maybe away from the more unhelpful things to the more helpful things, if that's what we want. And then sometimes it could be just knowing, like, if you know that eating those cookies are not helpful for you, but at one point you choose to do it despite it being helpful. That's still your choice, but I guess it's being aware of what's the consequences are for you and choosing to do that. I think that's everyone's choice to be able to do that, but often we don't have that knowing and we don't understand that kind of stuff first. We're not conscious of it.
Yeah, and you talked about the stress aspect, how stress impacts our mental health and our physical health. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, that's a very broad question.
Take it as you will.
I mean, stress is a word that lots of people use. And again, it can mean different things for different people. But stress, when we are stressed, it can impact how our body functions. We go into that fight-flight mode. That fight-flight mode means that some of the functions of the body are sort of shut down, and it's usually things like the digestive system, and other functions of the bodies are ready for action. And that's a really adaptive thing that we do. Like, that has let us survive. Stress can be incredibly helpful in terms of, I've got a presentation I've got to do. Stress is going to help me prepare. Stress is going to make sure I'm noticing things in the room, make sure I'm noticing people's reactions. I could shift how I sort of presenting. So stress, preparing for exams, some stress is a really good thing. So I think stress has been given a really bad name, whereas actually sometimes it's really helpful. What the more difficult thing is when we sit in this chronic state of stress, that we never go into that relaxation mode, that we're just on the go all the time. And what that does, it can essentially deplete our body. It can impact, as I said, that digestive system, meaning that we're not digesting food as well as we can. So I think there's this balance we really need to find. We need to probably have a little bit more, I guess, positive view on what stress is and how it can help us and how it has helped us, and what it can do for us. But we also need to have that other side of us that isn't always in stress mode and has that time where we are somehow relaxing, somehow sort of just having fun and enjoying it, and essentially having that balance. And I really think, again, in our world, we aren't often doing that. There's always something, particularly when we're much more in touch with our work. We always have our phone on. It's often dinging in the morning, or a message. And in a way, they're little stresses. It's like, oh, there's something on that phone, I need to look. And so it just makes you react. So I guess how you find time in your life, whether it is choosing to have an hour or so without your phone, without social media, finding something that you really enjoy in life that maybe you used to do that you don't do anymore, and then starting to engage in that kind of stuff again. Being in nature can often be a really de-stressing time, whether you have a meditation practice or a journaling practice. But I think we just need to, because our world is much more stressful, always things happening, I think we need to be much more conscious about having the times in our day where things aren't happening and we're having that downtime as well. And again, life does get in the way. I understand, I've worked with lots of families where kids are young or kids are unwell, and where are they ever going to find that time to de-stress? And sometimes even when, kids are in the hospital, I've worked with parents to go, well, what can you do? And there was one really simple thing where one of the parents I was working with, their child had cancer and they were in hospital a lot. And she just had this hand cream that she loved the smell. And for a minute a day at least, she would take out that hand cream, she would smell it, she would put it on her hands, and she would just take some deep breaths. And if that's all you can do in that really hectic life where you're trying to care for a really sick child, like such a stressful time, then there's ways that you can implement that kind of stuff in the day. And if that's what you can do, then that's what you can do. And I think we all have 30 seconds throughout the day. We have times where, we might be dropping our kids off at school or waiting to pick them up, and often we revert to looking at the phone, whereas maybe that's a time where you've got a whole minute where you can just take some deep breaths. So I think there's places we can find in the day. It's just how we're a bit inventive about that. And again, our thought processes prioritizing that for ourselves, that self-compassion. It's not necessarily the magic fix. It's not going to make you feel 100% better all the time, but it is going to help lower and manage your nervous system as well and help that stress too. So I don't know if that was really where you're wanting me to go with that answer, because it's a very broad answer, but hopefully that sort of answered your question.
Yeah, I like that. I love that what you're saying about stress being useful and very adaptive. And it is, and you're right, it has such a negative connotation a lot of times, but it's what, like, if there's a tiger chasing me, I don't want my body using energy to digest food. Like, I want my body using all of its energy, pump it into those muscles so I can run away from that tiger. And so it is absolutely is useful in a lot of ways. There's the new Mel Robbins, she got famous on TED Talk, and she is the author of the 5-second rule, and she has a new book out about fear and or about stress, and she talks about how excitement and anxiety are the same exact emotion. Your body does exactly the same thing when you're excited as it does when you are afraid. And her tip and suggestion is tell yourself you're excited. So anytime and it sounds so simple, but it really uses the biology, the fact that our bodies know what it's doing. It's trying to protect us. It doesn't understand that I don't need to run away from a term paper. Like, I need to listen to, I need to write this paper. But it sees danger because I'm afraid about it. But as soon as I consciously say, I'm so excited to write this paper, then our body goes, oh, okay, you're excited. Cool. And then it uses all of that energy to, instead of doing things that automatically bring me away from doing the paper, it uses all of that energy towards doing the paper. And so I just love what you're saying about, it is useful in so many ways. And just having that awareness of, like, this is it's like, when people have trauma, we say, and they have a traumatic response, and they go, this is causing problems in my life, that I'm having these flashbacks, that I'm having these nightmares. And we go, yes, it's causing you a problem right now. Your body doesn't understand. Like, your body doesn't know that it's causing you problems in your life. Your body is like, you need to survive. And so it's using these things to help you. And so it is that, like, consciously sometimes just like telling our bodies what it needs to know in order for those automatic responses to serve us and serve us well. So yeah, I love that. And I think that the conversation about stress is just so interesting. There's another study that talks about how stress, it's not the stress that is harmful to us. That we always think about, heart disease, right, and strokes, and all of the stress related physical ailments that we can get. And I always thought, heart attack, like, that's stress related. But then what they're finding is that it's not the stress that's causing it. It's the idea that stress is causing it is actually the factor in if that stress causes that physical reaction or not. And so it's like when we have a panic attack, right? So when we have a panic attack, we start to feel, and it's what causes agoraphobia, right? Is that we start to feel those first symptoms, those physical symptoms. Okay, it's getting harder to breathe. Okay, my shoulders are getting really tense, right? Or and my thoughts are racing, and I can't focus on what I'm doing. We start to see those things. And then automatically we start thinking, I'm going to have a panic attack. This is going to be really embarrassing. And it brings on the panic attack. And so similarly, they were kind of doing these studies about stress, saying, like, it's similar. It's that our reaction to the stress is what actually causes our bodies to go, oh, too much, and have these physical reactions.
And then our thoughts sort of keep us in that stress mode because we keep sort of thinking and continuing that. So it can make those emotions last longer than probably they would have otherwise.
Absolutely. Do you find that people have barriers to counseling, or that people have barriers to even, like, the mind-body connection piece?
Yeah, look, I think if we've grown up in a society that sort of says that these things are separate, and it becomes part of, I guess, what the culture or the zeitgeist, then I think to shift that way of thinking, any sort of change can have pushback and resistance. So I think there are barriers to that. I think there are barriers to counselling as well. I know you've talked about it before on your show, but I guess what I would say is that it's really important to be open. Like you don't necessarily come to the counsellor. You don't necessarily come to a counsellor and go, "You need to fix me." It is that collaborative relationship, and I think if you're coming again, it comes to that mindset again. If you're coming thinking that either it's not going to work or they need to do something to change me, then I think it's partly about that mindset too that's going to impact that change. So I really encourage people to be open and curious, to try some things. As we said before, not everything works the same for everyone else. So it could be something that you try that doesn't quite work for you. And I guess it's that figuring out what's not working. And that's easier to do with a counsellor because there is that collaboration. There is that, I guess, that separate lens that the counsellor is working with you on as well. So they could sort of give other ideas that you might not think of. So I think the other thing that the barriers to counselling are things like a stigma. I think people still think that mental illness is a weakness and there's often shame around it. And also people go, well, I'm not unwell enough to go to a counsellor. Whereas I think there's actually really good times you could go to a counsellor where you're not necessarily got a mental illness, that you can optimize things in your life and make things better and improve things. So I do think there are lots of barriers, but I'm hoping, I guess this is the purpose of your podcast really, isn't it? To sort of open up the idea and be able to talk about some of those barriers and how people can benefit from one and what they can do to start to have that open mind to go to one. And sometimes it doesn't always work first time. Sometimes that fit with that person isn't quite right. And I guess it's understanding maybe it's more about the fit or the lens that counsellor was sort of working through. But it's not counselling per se that's the issue. It's not the fact psychology doesn't work for them. It's maybe it wasn't quite the right fit. So, but I guess one of the things that's hard going to a counsellor, like to make that decision to sort of put yourself out there, to bare yourself to another person is really, really difficult. So I really congratulate the people that do make the decision and are able to do that. I understand it's really difficult. And hopefully things like this podcast can help manage those barriers and help people to get to the place where they need to be.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think that not most people, I'll say I wouldn't always think of, if I have a wellness goal, I think like medical model, exactly like you said, medical model will say there's something wrong with me. I need to get that fixed. And you're saying fixed is not optimization. Like there is a level beyond, oh, now I'm okay. And so even if you are okay, you can go to that next level. Everybody's got dreams. Everybody's got goals. And so being able to set those and say, there's nothing wrong with me, but like, this is where I want to be and this is what I want to do. And I'm going to get there. So I really love that perspective on it. I think that is really, really important for people to hear about. And then also, when people are having health concerns, the idea that a counselor could help you with some of those health concerns, I think we tend to go to a doctor or medicine or Weight Watchers, right? Like we tend to go to, these are the places we go to, but a counselor can really be helpful in a lot of those, meeting those other goals as well. So I love that.
I'm Erin Todd and I need a counselor.
Yes. Awesome. Yes. So do we, by the way. So we are Julie Johnson and Krista Brown. We want to thank Erin for being here. This has been really, really fun for us. We hope that you will consider coming on the podcast again, because I feel like we could have done a whole other episode. Yeah.
It would be great. I'd love to be invited back if you have time.
Awesome. All right. So if you are in Iowa and you have heard this and you've got a health goal, it doesn't have to be a mental health goal. It can be a physical health goal. You might have mental health areas where you can practice setting boundaries on your time, practice creating new habits. All of those things are going to help you work towards your physical goals as well. So, and physical wellness as well. So if you're in Iowa, give us a call, 800-531-4236. You can find us on Facebook at Heart and Solutions. You can find us on Instagram at iHeartSolutions.
And like Julie mentioned at the beginning, we post every Sunday night at 5. So save up that laundry, do your laundry, listen to us, and help us, or let us help you get ready to call your counselor on Monday, and schedule your appointment if you haven't done so, or find a new counselor to contact as well.
Absolutely. Send us a message on social media if you have a question for Erin, or if you have a question about counseling in general. We will go ahead and make sure that we ask her those questions that you send in the next time that she is on.
And I'm Krista Brown.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye.